Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video, I want to talk about a couple of interesting things. First, I want to briefly touch on a few of the pieces of news and information. I've already discussed them a bit on the live. Have come out over the last few days and compared to some of the things I said before because I find it quite interesting people's somewhat inability to properly evaluate information and things that are said. Secondly, I want to go over, there's a lot of sentiment about, um, you know, why managers have failed and, different reasons and things like that. But the hiring of Ruben Amorim as it comes through will be the first time ever that United are actually doing things the right way. Um, it's different. It is very different, but I want to explain why and give my opinions on why it hasn't worked out with under managers and why, though there's no guarantees and there's definitely question marks, Ruben Amorim represents the best chance that we've had, of course, among all these hires and kind of go through it. So I think that'll be rather interesting. But first and foremost, in talking about Ruben Amorim, I've seen some interesting things come up. Now, if you go back to videos on October 4th, I talked about Ruben Amorim being somebody that United really like for the long term. And if you go back to October 17th or 24th, something like that, I said he was not the top target. I strongly stand by that. And that's part of the problem with things getting aggregated in videos. I don't blame individuals aggregating it because I understand, but there's always the context surrounding it. I very much stand by that information. Ruben Amorim was not the top target, but it's not a big deal. There are always multiple alternatives to targets. In the summer, in which was reported by Lowry today, United viewed him but actually passed over him due to certain concerns that they had. As I understand it, those concerns were one, his inexperience, that he might not be ready for a job this big. At the time, they also didn't have Dan Ashworth in place, didn't have maybe the backup that they would have needed. Two, there were some concerns over aspects of his play style. And three, there was costs involved in summer, which is why they ended up looking at managers who are free. Since that period of time, they've still held other managers in higher regard. That's okay. That doesn't mean those managers were attainable. I stand by that pretty strongly. It doesn't matter, though. That's the point where it all gets really, really silly, is it doesn't matter. It's just talk. And that's why there's always context to all of this. Like I've said before, if they could have got Xabi Alonso, he probably would have been the top target. And he is a big target for Manchester City. And I stand strongly by information that I have that they reached out to just check on that, but continued to pretty much not get any kind of indication that Xabi Alonso would be willing to join. They checked on Julian Nagelsmann before summer as well. There are other potential names out there. So the reason for top target, this, that, top choice, all that, doesn't really matter. He didn't go from being, not on the top of the list to the clear top of the list in 3 months. That's not how football works. That's not how transfers work. That's not how appointments work. They have a lot of different ideas of who they've wanted, but there's about attainability, there's about reality, and all of that. I'm very happy with this because I strongly, strongly indicated for some time now that Ruben Amorim was a high target, one very admired from United for a long time. Not just the new team, but people who've been at United for a long time. Someone to keep an eye on for the future, even as many as 2-3 years ago when he was first getting going in Portugal. And now they are making that move for him. So those things are not at odds. The information of him not necessarily being the top target to right now being the top choice for manager. Those are two different things, and that is all okay. And it doesn't denigrate Ruben Amorim and say that he's not a good manager or that he's not the right fit. Liverpool went through 5-6 different managers. Arne Slot was not their top choice at the start of the process. But in evaluating all of the things, he became the right choice. That's what matters. And it's the same for, probably for Maresca, Chelsea. It would be foolish, I think, to look at it even on a hierarchy of necessarily top versus something else. You have all of your people who are viewed as really good candidates. Maybe some are a little higher up, but when you evaluate all principles, and all aspects of it, you come down to it. I also stand by Thomas Frank being pretty high up there, but obviously not as high as Ruben Amorim. Now, through this season, with the support structures in place, with recruitment, we'll talk about that in a minute, with the start that he's had, with some of the evaluations that have been done, some of the concerns they had over him tactically and stylistically were quelled. But not only that, just how bad it's been has, of course, changed the thinking over the last couple of months into, okay, we just need to start this project to build from the scratch. We get a young manager, he'll have more time to get things wrong. And in some ways, bringing him in mid-season is a little bit of a blessing for him because it's a free hit this year. He gets this time where he's not had his own window, where he's coming into a team that was already kind of doing poorly. He's not at a preseason to get his ideas in place. Nobody will expect him to hit the ground absolutely flying. It could take some time. That's all good. That's okay. And in some ways that reduces the risks involved with Ruben Amorim, giving him time to experience the Premier League without that pressure in place. It could hardly do worse than being in 13th or 14th, and I'm sure that we won't. The other factor about all of this that I see that's really interesting is they did decide to give Ten Hag more time during the break. He got more time. What they decided during the break was there. And if you've watched the videos, I think on October 9th, I talked about succession planning. I thought he was going to get more time than this, frankly. But I did tell you that Sir Jim told them things needed to improve. And he gave Barada and Ashworth approval to go do whatever they needed to do to fix this at their decision. Their initial decision was to give Ten Hag more time. And there was two factors in that. Number one was they wanted to see if he could turn things around. And number two was they didn't have anybody lined up. But I did tell you they evaluated candidates and they decided on a plan, including their short-term plans and long-term plans based on what would happen. And they were given essentially carte blanche to dispense with Ten Hag or hire somebody else, do whatever they wanted to do without having to have a new board meeting. And they didn't. This was all totally correct. And anyway, it's just funny. And it is an unfortunate thing of people, who don't necessarily watch all of the videos where things get misrepresented in terms of how they're stated. I'm really happy with how it's presented. Do we have everything exactly right? No. I thought on Monday we were going to get Thomas Frank because I didn't think Amorim was available. And I thought that would be another thing that pushed him down the list. And when you read the Athletic deep dive, I think that's pretty interesting because they felt the same, but then in conversations with him, that changed. And then he became more viable, and that would have pushed him up the list. Because again, that might have been a reason he wasn't on top of the list, is the lack of availability. Not necessarily just the evaluation of his ability as a manager. So they've had just some good notes on this, is they've had some of their concerns over him as a coach quelled by how he started the season, some of the results in Europe that he's getting, which was a question mark over him, some of the tactical changes that he's done, and in keeping him in a watchful eye, because he was a long-term target that I think was going to be, if it had gone to the end of the year, I think he would have been probably top of the list by then. With how this season was going, they've seen enough to be convinced of him. And that's awesome. Great manager. So let's talk about why it hasn't worked for other managers and why it's really interesting, this call for Ruben Amorim, and why I think it's going to be a much better fit than anything before and the first time we really have a chance. This is my opinion, my view of things, my breakdown, but I think it's important. If we talk about kind of the keys to success, and yes, I'm going to do this as like a PowerPoint, which I hope you enjoy. In terms of appointing a manager, I think there's a lot of key things. Number one is you have to decide on a play style. We know that. We've had other people say that, right? That it's about, Sir Jim has said that you got to decide on your style of play, the way that you, the way that you want to do things, the way that you want to go ahead, the way that you want to play for the long term as a club. You have to look at your existing squad and say what fits it, because this determines how long it takes for any manager to kind of figure it out, right? To fit into there. If you don't have a squad that fits a manager, it's going to take a lot more time to fit that manager and to turn things over. You have to recruit properly for this defined style of play. You have to have youth playing this style of play and also promote them. And then, of course, there's the question of, is the ceiling of this style good enough to win the league? Is the style that's been decided one that is actually a style of play that will work? You know, you could pick Sean Dyche ball and do all the things for that, but that's never going to win you leagues and titles. And then, of course, it comes down to the manager's ability themselves to carry these things out, to get those ideas across to players, to coach them, and the choices that they make in game. So when I look at United, regardless of managers, what have they been getting wrong? They've never had a decided play style. This is what we want to do. So there's been a lot of chopping and changing, and they've never properly recruited consistently for a style of play either. So with that, you know, things that the club should be deciding on first and foremost is essentially a failure, right? You don't know about the existing squad fit. It could not. And then because of these things, you end up with that not working as well. And so really, yeah, in a lot of cases, it was impossible for any manager to succeed here. But let's look at a few. Louis van Gaal, first and foremost, 76 matches in the Premier League, 39 wins, 19 draws, 18 losses. Goal scoring, pretty bad, 111 and 76. So the record was pretty low there. Defensively, just slightly under a goal per game. What do we look at with him? Well, Louis van Gaal, to his credit as a manager, had a very clear style of play that he was integrating. So if we had decided to move in that direction following Sir Alex Ferguson, it would have made sense. But what was the problem? Existing squad fit. We didn't have a squad that fit Louis van Gaal at that point in time. Quite different. You know, obviously, I don't know that we had a squad to fit anybody at the end of Sir Alex's tenure, but certainly going from a little more like, I don't know what you would call it, stylistically for Sir Alex, is a little more old school. It's a little more attacking, to the very slow, plodding possession, passing and crossing based style of Louis van Gaal. I don't think we had the squad to fit him. And so it was going to take a lot of time to turn that over. They did recruit for his style. They recruited a lot of players that I think fit him. You know, when you look at some of the people signed that really don't fit other styles, that we probably wouldn't sign now, but that did fit players like Daley Blind, all of that. There was a lot of recruitment of those types of players. I'm not saying the quality of the recruitment was great, but we did recruit for that style. He was good with youth promotion. And in some ways, Louis van Gaal, we were probably as a club doing the right things with him for the most part, to start over and to build something. And he was building something. Now, whether that thing was good enough is another question. And that's where we talk about the ceiling of the style. Was the style of play that Louis van Gaal was bringing in capable of winning leagues, of winning titles? And was it something that was capable of surviving the interest of United fans who have been used to much more attacking, much more aggressive, much more entertaining style historically under Sir Alex Ferguson? And when you look at the way that teams like, you know, comparing City, there's maybe styles that wouldn't be accepted at Old Trafford. And so that was a question mark, but he did a lot of things right managerially, but it was going to take a lot of time to fully flesh out a Louis van Gaal team. And the question was, of course, was it worth it? We don't know. We really don't. Now, I think Louis van Gaal was a good manager for what he did, and made good choices, and was able to really implement a style in place, right? So the question was, of course, one, it's going to take a long time to turn that squad over. And two, was the style good enough? It was fairly boring. It was fairly quiet. And I don't know in that case. But in some respects, if you'd stuck with Louis van Gaal and continued to do what we were doing, it may have been the best that we could have gotten. I don't know about the ceiling, and then that would have been a little bit tricky. Then we move on to Jose Mourinho. Now, Jose Mourinho has still, I think, today the best win record after Sir Alex Ferguson among permanent managers. In 144 games managed, 84 wins, 244 goals. So a much, much better goal scoring record than Louis van Gaal. Not dramatically so, but decently so. And only 121 goals conceded. Won a lot of games. A good manager, a very good manager for United. And, you know, obviously, again, he came with a clear playing style, a clear way of wanting to play football. But again, not one decided by the club, but at least Jose had a clear playing style. The existing squad fit, again, a huge issue. We bounced from building a Louis van Gaal team to a Jose style, very different in what they wanted out of their players. This, of course, meant it was going to take more time. We did recruit for his style at the start and then abandoned it. And this is one of the biggest reasons Jose Mourinho failed. In the World Cup summer, the summer before he got sacked, he was asking for center backs and asking for significant signings that he would have needed to continue to build out his way. Now, one could question whether we should have followed through with Jose on recruiting for style, whether getting players like Perisic in would have been the idea, but the truth is we didn't. So we never really gave him a chance to build on that second place finish that he called his greatest accomplishment, which it probably was considering the state of that squad. We did not let him get rid of players that didn't fit him, like Martial and Pogba. And so it didn't happen. And we didn't do that. And so that, hard to say what would have happened with Jose if he was fully backed in that regard. There was some decent youth promotion. I don't know. There was younger players used for sure. I think, Scott McTominay certainly came through. He kept using some of the younger players. I think the ceiling of the style under Jose was potentially very good. It's really hard to tell with the Jose Mourinho team because he's at times very defensive, but you've also seen he does have a style that can win Premier Leagues and win Champions Leagues. Now he's kind of been on the decline, so it's maybe a question mark there. But Jose was also had a lot of good moments managing the team. Again, very strong at implementing his style into the team. You knew that they were playing a Jose way. There was no question about that. And he was good even to the end at changing the game. You think about Juventus, you think about Man City, you think about Newcastle, doing sometimes crazy things that worked to change the game. And so Jose, it makes sense why he failed. It's not a question of it. But it probably wasn't the right guy again, and it was going to take a long time to build his squad out. And obviously, the downside with that of building a Jose squad is it's hard to fit it to somebody else, and there's a lot of usually aging players in there. Then it comes to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, right? When we make comparisons with him, 54.2% win, so better than Van Gaal, certainly provided the most entertainment, I think, since Sir Alex Ferguson among fans. A lot of wins. Goal scoring record was the best, the most goals scored per game. Defensively, worse than Van Gaal and Mourinho. But exciting and interesting, right? I didn't do David Moyes. I know you can see him on here because I just didn't think it was worth doing. But exciting. Had some really good moments. But what was the issue here? Playing style was kind of there, but not totally clear. For what he wanted to play, you probably could see it start to show up, so we can allow it. And it probably fit some of the United DNA, as you might call it, but the existing squad fit was terrible, right? After then switching from an LVG to a Jose team, which neither of them fit each other, then you go to an Ole team, which struggled to utilize a lot of those players. So you end up having most of the key players being new players that he's signing. You think Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, and younger players from the academy, guys like Greenwood and Rashford, and then signing Bruno and yada yada. And as we signed more players, it did improve. As we signed more players to fit him, it did improve. You could ask questions about the final summer on the recruitment for style, but I think that's a different answer. It got bad at the end. You start to look at how did Jadon Sancho fit into there? How did Ronaldo fit into there? And it became less clear that we were actually recruiting for style and just recruiting on talent. Now, Solskjaer had some really good ideas for names of players that he wanted to bring in that we didn't, but we did not follow through on that. So I don't think we actually recruited for a style under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at all. Youth promotion I thought was pretty good. The ceiling of the style I would say was poor. As a coach, I don't think that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had what it took to take us to the top level in terms of a ceiling of style. It was too passive, a little bit too much on the counter. We struggled to break teams down when they didn't give us spaces in behind. And as we tried to move into a pressing team, into a more proactive team, it all fell apart. And so I think that there just was the ceiling of the style there was not there. One of the things that I do think Solskjaer was very good at is in-game management. routinely United would come back from being down to win more than anybody else, right? We saw that time and time again under Solskjaer. So he was good at adjusting to the games. So I think he understood that aspect of the game well, but maybe the setting up and the long-term decisions of the team just wasn't there. Then we go to Ten Hag. Under Ten Hag, 85 matches, 123 goals for. I believe it makes him around Louis van Gaal for goals for. Poor record, not great offensively, and 112 goals against in 85 matches. By far the worst defense we've had under any manager. Also, the worst losing record under any manager, the highest percentage of losses as well. And here's where it gets really funny with Ten Hag. While he had what would appear to be a very clear style at Ajax, we never saw it at United. We really don't know that he, when you compare Louis van Gaal, you could tell how he wanted to play. Jose, you know how he wanted to play. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, you actually did totally know what you want to play. It's just people weren't happy with it. But Ten Hag, I still don't know to this day what he was actually trying to do. It changed not just from season to season, but from week to week. It would seem to change dramatically, where nobody could really answer beyond a few basic principles, which were kind of just go for it. It was a little bit odd in that respect. You couldn't tell, was it going to be a high press? Was it going to be a mid block? Was it going to be a deep block? Were we going to play on the counter? Were we going to make artificial transitions with the press? What were we going to do? It changed often. Verticality was about the only thing that existed. Inverting versus overlapping, like so many changes there, and we had those questions. Existing squad fit, again, a disaster. And when I spoke about, in the past, this was my biggest thing when it was like the Pochettino versus Ten Hag debate. I wanted us to have continuity with Pochettino because I thought the squad fit him. And I said that it would probably take a decade to build a Ten Hag team. I'd probably stand by that. Even though we overhauled a lot of it, it wasn't worth it. You still could say we'd have to overhaul it even more to build a Ten Hag team, which we still don't know what that is at this point. But again, this is where we always have this rebuild. With every manager, we've never hired somebody who fits the squad. And so it's always starting over. It doesn't have to be that way. It's not always starting over if it doesn't work out with a manager. Recruitment for style, we definitely did. He got an enormous amount of recruitment for his style of players. But also, fortunately, in the more recent summer, we hired some players that fit potentially other styles as well. Youth promotion, I think he did a good job on this. I think he promoted enough players, as much as anybody else, to bring them in. Kobbie Mainoo, Garnacho, some key players in there. The ceiling of the style, I think, was crap. We never really saw any style that would tell us, hey, if we got really good at this, we'd be a good football team. Never saw it. So it's hard to say that the style that we were trying to play, whatever it was, would win us anything. And then manager's ability and in-game choices, I think he was by far the worst of the lot. Whereas in the first season, it seemed like he was actually pretty good at this. In the second and third seasons, it became absolutely baffling. The choices time and time again would drive us into ruin, and we would blow leads, we would collapse. We conceded more late goals from winning positions under him than any other manager combined in the Premier League for us. So that was an issue. So he just wasn't the right guy. But so these were not unpredictable things, and they were pretty much doomed to fail, sometimes due to the manager, but usually also in combination with that big problem that has been a failure with every single manager, which is the existing squad fit. So then it brings us to Ruben Amorim. And when he comes in, hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll see about these clauses and things that are all being still negotiated. If it's at the international break, then it's at the international break. Then so be it. If it's this weekend or next weekend, then so be it. So, yeah. But where does it fit with him? Well, number one, we can very much say that Ruben Amorim has a style. Now, we could put a little bit of a question mark on this, but I'm not going to, because the club have decided on a style finally. And we know he has one of the most rigid styles of football at Sporting. And when I say rigid, I mean he has stuck to his style no matter what. It was something that came up in interviews with Liverpool. It's something that's being reported by United reporters like Larry now, that he sticks to his style. So I think we probably can erase all doubt that he has a style and that he wants to stick to it. and that it does fit our club kind of ethos. Existing squad fit, if you actually look at this, I think Ruben Amorim has the best fit to a current squad of any permanent manager we have hired. When you break it down, and I explained this yesterday why I think so, but that was also apparently an assessment that was made according to Laurie Whitwell as well, that it did fit. We have the center backs for it. Both De Ligt and Maguire are very experienced central center backs in a back three who would fit in there very well. We hired Lenny Euro for that right side who fits into that well. We have a lot of narrow forwards. Rasmus Højlund is basically Gyökeres that he's using very well at Sporting. Wingers like Ahmad with free roles and Bruno fit. We've signed his midfielders in Ugarte and Kabi Mainu can fit that extremely well. Rashford as an inside forward. The biggest question, really the only questions that we have for the most part on squad are questions we already have. We don't know if we have anybody who can play left back or left wing back properly. But in his system, that's even wingers. And someone like Garnacho actually could fit that. And then at left center back and guarding the channels. Well, Inacio and Lisandro Martinez are quite similar players. So there's fit there too. We might want to get somebody else like we were looking at Gerard Braithwaite for the long term. But overall, the squad fits him. It fits him quite well where he could build that team. The obvious holes are the ones that we have problems anywhere. And I think that that's important to note. Recruitment for style. This is something that I think we've actually done this summer. De Ligt fits him. I think Mazraoui actually fits quite well into one of his wingback roles. Ugarte, we know, is somebody, right? Ugarte, we know, obviously has played for him. So, it actually matches even players that we've signed this summer. Joshua Zirkzee, I'm not totally sure, but I have a feeling it's going to work out and they've got an idea for it. His front three are very fluid, very narrow, and you could see how they could interplay together well with someone like him. He could play behind, in that floating kind of role, behind, two runners, Højlund and Rashford, or mixed in there. So there's a lot of options, but the important thing is it's all these narrow forwards, and we have a lot of them. And again, in the midfield, Casemiro, Mount, Kabi Mainu, Ugarte, all actually fit quite well into his midfield too. Youth promotion, obviously we'll see what he does at United, but he did a really great job of this at Sporting. So it's a question mark because that's something we'll have to see. These are the things where it's more about the manager. Will he utilize the youth? He's done it at Sporting. It's a question mark. We'll see if he does it at United. The ceiling of his style. This could be a question mark, but personally, I think that when you've looked at him and why he's been decided on is that the way he plays has been extremely dominant. It's attacking, it's aggressive, and if it's pulled off, it has a very high ceiling. So there's a little obviously there's a question mark in terms of how it translates, but if you watch him play, you see Liverpool all the time. You will. You'll see what Liverpool did under Klopp in so many ways. And it is definitely a style that intends to be very dominant and intends to win games. So I think at least in initial assessment, you would have to believe it's a style that could work, where you might have questions with if you hired a manager like, I don't know who would be a good example for the Premier League, but if you went and hired a manager, I'm not going to go all the way down to something like Sean Dycheball or something like that, but obviously you would know that wouldn't work. In terms of the ceiling, I think those are the question marks under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer you'd have in the beginning. He's never shown anything to tell you he's got that. There's other clubs that play in Europe that play not so dominant style football with some success that you would have questions over the ceiling of it. But for now, it would appear that the ceiling is quite high. And then his manager's ability and in-game choices, we'll have to see how that translates to the Premier League. He's very active as a manager in-game. At Sporting, for example, yesterday, makes 3 halftime substitutions, presses the advantage, ends up getting them the big win. Does that very often, changing the games, getting goals in the second half, pushing the advantage and maintaining that. So he's had a really good record at changing the game at Sporting. We have to see how that translates to the Premier League when it's a bit different. So, in this way, I feel that it is a totally different appointment because all of the things that should be there are there. And the biggest thing is we actually have a squad that would fit the manager this time. And of all the managers that we're looking at, that was kind of important, right? You have a few different types of managers. Thomas Tuchel, more pragmatic. And one of the reasons he became of interest, especially for Sir Jim, is he's a manager who probably could do more without the support structures behind him, but can also adjust himself to any squad. Thomas Frank, we've seen him be adjustable. He played a very attacking style in the Championship, more pragmatic in the Premier League. But that's, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the difference. And then you take someone like Ruben Amorim, it fits. And so I think, when you look at all the different names that are out there, they're not that different when you compare certain principles of them and how they play, and the names that might have been on the list. It becomes more understandable. It wasn't so scattergun, and it makes a lot of sense. And if your top choices was Xabi Alonso, which I stand by, Julian Nagelsmann, and Ruben Amorim, guess what? They're not that dissimilar. All three of them, young up and coming coaches, back three with a lot of them. They play fairly similar styles. If you watch Sporting, it's probably a slightly more aggressive version of Xabi Alonso's team too. Not that different. So there is continuity in how they were looking at managers and all of that. And so I feel very confident in that decision, that they've made it for the right reasons. And the fact that it was quiet, that Amorim was probably not the most popular choice. I mean, people are getting excited now. People still have doubts now. But nobody was talking about him 2 months ago besides me. But here he is. A lot of people were talking about Xavi. A lot of people were talking about what they did look at. But a lot of people kept going on and on about Tuchel and all of that. Well, this is the guy that fits it better. They did not talk to Tuchel recently, which is another thing. I said many, 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 many times that he's not a recent candidate. Sir Jim likes him, but he's not a recent candidate. He was not seen as somebody, especially after turning us down in summer, that was as good a fit when it comes to Dan Ashworth, Barada, and co. being in place. So anyway, that's what I've got. I just wanted to go over that. Hope you find it interesting. I think it is interesting. I'll go live here in a few ahead of the game today, and we'll do a watch along, and that'll be fun. But I thought this would be of interest, and also wanted to it's so funny. There's so many people who seem to be so obsessed with the information that we give, and think there's some like big conspiracy in it. I just tell you what I know. And one of the reasons I do it in these video formats, which I know these types of people don't actually watch, and if they do, if you're watching hours of my content each week just to hate on Twitter, then good for you. Is that a lot of things need to be explained within context. I don't put things out as briefs. I don't put things out in the way that they're framed as PR. I put them out as to what actually goes on, and behind the scenes, and a lot of that, is as it goes, and sometimes it's less popular, and sometimes it's less acceptable, and many times it'll be denied. I mean, I'm not trying to discredit anybody, but Laurie Whitwell was being told last week Ineos didn't want to sack Ten Hag. Meanwhile, they're talking to other managers. Well, it is what it is. That's okay. That's all right. It's just the nature of information and how things change. And I don't feel I'm at a point where I have to prove credibility for the people who follow and watch and understand what we do here. But I appreciate everybody who supports it. And, I'm just trying to, especially as we move into this fully new era now, let's be positive, be together as a fan base, and hope that we can get somewhere. With the club, with a new manager, with everything new and things being done for the right reasons, I hope we can. Okay, thank you for watching. I'll see you later if you're going to attend the live or the watch along. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next one.